guys so much for tuning in. This is the main keynote, which is all about words of wisdom from women who persisted, otherwise known as the Hall of Legends. My name is Laurel Mintz, and I will be your moderator and host for this panel of powerhouse women. This is actually my third or maybe fourth time hosting, and I'm so honored to be a part of the Witty family. So I just want to shout out to Witty for hosting and for having me again. Thank you so much. Just give you a bit of a background on me. I run a marketing agency here in Los Angeles called Elevate My Brand, per the logo. And we do digital and experiential for huge tech brands like Verizon, Facebook, Zendesk, and Sprinklr. So that's a bit about my pedigree, but enough about me. It is about these incredible women that I am so lucky to have on my panel. I always find that they can do way far better introductions of themselves than I can. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Sarah Rushinik. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Perfect.
Perfect. I am Russian after all, so I am a little bit of Polish, so I hope I got it right. So Dr. Sarah, please give us your background and a little bit of your pedigree, please.
Okay, pedigree. I feel like one of the dogs, you know, I'm in the dog show.
You're a purebred in our eyes.
Right. Mostly poodle.
I love it.
So I'm Sarah Rushinik, and currently I'm a professor at the University of Miami. I wear many hats. I'm in the School of Business in the Department of Business Technology, and I'm a professor in health informatics. And I'm also wear a hat in the medical school. We have a program for translational research. That means taking the project on the bench and bringing it in as a real business. My pedigree, if you want to say, my undergraduate degree is from Tel Aviv University, and my graduate degree is from the University of Texas at Austin. I've taught at a number of different universities, including out west at UCLA and USC, and the University of San Francisco, and all the way in the Mideast in Tel Aviv University and the Technion, which is the Israel Institute of Technology. What I can say in general is I think about technology, just not for technology's sake, but how to make it better for humanity, how to make it better for business and be more effective. And I'm just so pleased to be part of Witty. I've gotten to know them quite well in doing some seminars, and also last year in being honored to be in the Hall of Fame. And it was a great idea to have it physical, but now we're doing it virtual. So we'll continue in the future.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to popcorn it over to Dr. Genevieve Bell.
Oh, hi. This would be migrating from Canberra, Australia, where I now find myself, so the capital of Australia. I have, much like Sarah, a complicated background. I'm actually a cultural anthropologist by training, so I did my PhD at Stanford. I studied Native Americans at the turn of the last century and thought about the turn of 2 centuries ago now. I was really focused on education and government policy, and it's a strange stretch to get from there to Silicon Valley, where I spent the better part of 20 years working. Short answer is I met a man in a bar. Long answer is I should not be asked for career guidance, ever. So I spent 20 years at Intel. I built up most of Intel's user experience practice and its sort of design thinking area, and hired most of its first cohort of research social scientists, did that kind of work. About 4 years ago, I came home to Australia to set up a new program here at the Australian National University to somewhat unambitiously establish a new branch of engineering to take AI safely, responsibly, and sustainably to scale, because that seemed like a good idea. Much like Sarah, I still have many hats. So I'm a professor in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. In fact, I'm sure that still astonishes my colleagues because anthropologist. I maintain a role at Intel where I'm still a senior fellow and a vice president. And in my copious spare time, I seem to be sitting locally here on the Prime Minister's Science and Tech Council. And I've just joined as a representative for a new global initiative on AI. So that's sort of where my work is.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, in my spare time, I read books and drink a lot of coffee.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you would drink a lot of wine, because with that background, I would need to turn it off sometimes, no?
No, just the coffee, just the coffee.
Just coffee. Got it. Well, thank you for that. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Elizabeth Shue.
Well, it's very hard to follow those two outstanding ladies. And by training, I'm a scientist as well. And I studied the atmospheric science and the space physics. And later on, I found out the computer science is way more interesting. So I got a master in computer science as well. So I did a lot of modeling, like using satellite images to predict the weather patterns, what the fog, how long the fog gonna last, what gonna be the impact to the almonds, the flower pollination in the Central Valley. It's quite interesting. And then I've been CTO at the BMC Software, CP Group, and also advisory role in MIT, University of Nevada, Reno. I taught 6 years at the Stanford Continuing Education, really about all sorts of topics. So currently I'm on the few boards, Remark, which is an AI company that we do thermal imaging and to detect humans' temperature on airplane, airport, and many public places like casino as well, school. And then, as all the ladies said, we all wear different hats and doing different things. And the thing is, technology is so motivating. And every time I look at technology, it's not about the AI. It's about the life can be better with that technology. And if we don't misuse it. I want to stop right here, just saying, I'm so passionate about the future.
I didn't get that from you at all, actually, no. Well, as everyone watching can tell, these women are just incredible, and that's why we've asked all of them to be on this panel today. Before we jump into the questions that I have, I did just want to open it up and let you guys know that there is a chat function here in Zoom, and really this is about you. These women have created some fantastic technologies. They've been involved with so many organizations and companies that have and are changing the world. But ultimately, this panel is about how their journey can help impact you. So please send in questions and we will integrate them into the dialogue, because otherwise you're just going to hear me asking questions over and over again. And again, we really want this to be about all of you listening in and how you can further your careers like these incredible women have. So that is me on my soapbox, and I will get off of it. But my first question to you guys is, what does the word persistence mean? This whole panel is about women who persist. So we're going to just kind of have an open dialogue. I'm not going to ask any one particular person to answer a question, but please just respond when you feel like you've got a response that is relevant. So what does persistence mean?
Well, I can do
start it off.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
Sarah, go right ahead.
Go ahead. No, good.
We're so polite. Sarah, why don't you start, and then we'll shift it over to Elizabeth.
I think when you think tech, you have to think persistence. I usually tell my students two things. If someone says about tech, it's easy, no problem, I know one of two things. It's either they're lying to me or they don't know what they're talking about. There's always going to be problems. Think about it, alpha, beta, and so forth. So if persistence is necessary, it's definitely necessary in tech, because so many times I'm down underneath the table. So many times I've tried to do my forecasts and they work beautifully on pay. Then, for instance, right now I'm doing strategies for automated trading systems, basically trying to mimic how the stock market will be going. And my models were beautiful. I was so pleased. I thought I was going to discover the world, the holy grail. And then I work with actual traders and I say, try this out. It changes so quickly. I become humble very easily. So we have to go back and forth through the system. So I just wanted to tell you, if you don't feel like you have persistence, then tech is not for you.
I think that's a very, very fair statement. So to your point, it's about iterating and being open to failure, because that's where you learn. And I love that you said that if you think you've got it nailed, then you're lying. I think you're totally right, because technology can be a beast at any level. But being open to failure, I think, is a really important part of persistence. Elizabeth, what was your response on that?
Well, I think a persistent, yeah, to the science, like how much passion you have toward the technology and science. And then that persistence enable you to become a learner. You learn new things. You not only learn from the book, from the webinar, you learn from people who may be 2 levels down. Maybe you're a student, right? You learn from everyone. In Chinese, we say there's 3 people, there must be a master. So you learn. Another thing is you need to be really persistent in your daily, I would say your daily activities, like be persistent in taking the exercise, make sure your physical attributes are up to the challenge, right? Learn new things, to exercise, and to really to build human connections. Like if you think about it, whatever technology we do, if we do not build the human connection, if we do not build the software or our technology really serve the human really well, then that technology is useless. I want to really pass this, because we have a human user experience expert here. I shouldn't emphasize that too much, but I think the connection to human, not only just user experience to the customer, but also to your team and to your shareholder, to whoever is who's interested in the technology, is tremendously important. And if you can take their feedback, just like you're trying to collect the questions from our audience. That is so important, that whether it's virtual, whether it's in reality, like face to face, that connection, that persistent, you keep going that. Even people to say, I don't want to tell you, I don't want to tell you, or I don't want to collaborate with you, but you being persistent, being open to say, I want to embrace you. I really want to do this with you. I want to take your input. That is so incredibly important.
I think we all would love to physically embrace each other right now. I know that's a point of human connection that we all miss. I love the humanity angle of that, because I think when we think about technology, it's not brought up enough. So I really appreciate that. And we do have some great questions coming in from the audience. So I'm going to shoot this one over to Genevieve. This person asked, Claudia asked, how do you find sponsors or mentors when you're considered senior in your career and the focus seems to be on growing the careers of younger women? So do you have someone above you that you look up to, and how did you find that person?
You always have to have people like that, right? So but I mean, for me, there's a couple of pieces, right? One, always telling the difference between a mentor, a sponsor, and an advocate, because I think you need all of those different things. So the notion of someone that can be someone that you go to for advice and sometimes hard truths, because I suspect my answer to the persisting thing is also knowing when to stop. Because I think sometimes we insist on doing the same thing over and over again because we've been told that persisting is good. And sometimes what you actually need to do is go, no, enough of this now. I'm going to go do a different thing. So a mentor for me is someone who's also willing to be a little bit willing to tell you things that you can't quite get out of your own head enough to tell you, and give you permission sometimes to hear those things. But also then finding sponsors and advocates, so people who are willing to champion you and open doors for you. I think no matter how grown up you get, you still need those, because you want to break into new spaces, you want to think about new places, you want to find different branches that you're following. Because again, I think about my own career, and I'm sure the same is true with Elizabeth and Sarah. They're not straight lines, right? We have made a number of pivots in our sort of careers to date, and I don't plan to stop doing that. So finding people who you want to have those conversations with is important. But I also think, I feel like I have a huge responsibility the older I get to be bringing up a whole lot of other people behind me, so that it shouldn't just be about me, but there's a point where you pivot to doing more mentoring yourself. And I think that's also really important. And mentoring for me, as many different kinds of people as possible.
I think mentorship is absolutely critical, but I think Claudia's question, I would guess that she's probably fairly senior. So maybe she's looking for someone who is senior above her. Any guidance in terms of how to find that person?
Listen, I think it depends what you mean by senior above you, right? So
true. It's very true.
Being brought into hierarchies doesn't always help. I think if you imagine the person you want to mentor you is a very senior person, the worst thing that you can do is not ask. I mean, truthfully, you know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you ask someone to be your mentor? They're going to say no. You're not going to die of a broken heart under those circumstances or anything else. And truthfully, most of those, if they've answered your email, that is an opening for a conversation. So I was thinking, you know, the worst thing you can do there, the worst thing you can do is not ask and wish you had. Being brave enough to send an email. As someone who gets a lot of those emails, I try and answer all of them. And I'm sure most senior people are the same. So find someone you think you're going to learn from, but don't make the mistake of thinking that the only people you learn from are
may not have to use also the word mentor.
Sarah, go ahead. So you might not have to use the word mentor. I think she's frozen for a moment, but I think it's about the naming, I think was her point, is that it doesn't have to be a mentor, a junior, a senior, that it's just really someone who you can learn from. And I think, to your point, Genevieve, that can be someone at every level. Sarah, I believe you're back. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
So what I wanted to say was that sometimes I feel that mentor and mentoree relationship is not so well defined.
True.
That many times, that's the whole idea, is that we can learn from so many people from different skill areas. And that's where I'm always open, that I think that curiosity, but also that, for instance, anyone can bring information to me and they have my skills. And I think the whole idea of a teamwork is finding people with those strengths. So a lot of times I think even from younger people, they say, I don't even think about mentor and mentee, but it's rather who can I have a connection with? So I think that last comment would be, where does that person want to go? Or what is that person's goal? And then not even approaches as I need a mentor, but maybe I need some connections and I need some more closer connection with that person to be able to continue.
I love that. You basically just reverse engineered it for Claudia.
Yeah,
that was
and
great.
I would say that I wrote a book called The Myth of a Promotion, and one of the chapters is talking about networking and mentoring. You know, I summarize the source of mentors. You could just go to an event and talk to someone, and then you find out this person is advice is more meaningful for you. You can initiate lunch or some other dialogue, and make sure that you don't waste the person's time. HR partners and your bosses, former boss, anyone that, even your neighbor could be a mentor, as long as this person has the relevant experience and also you're willing to take advice from that person. I think that willingness on the both sides is very important. It just, you give other persons permission to tell you the hard truth and also give you the suggestion that is maybe from the left field. You could never even see it.
I love that answer. You guys are so smart. And I think that the different components that you brought in are so relevant for that answer. So now we have a question that flips to the other side of the table, which is, what are you guys looking for when you're choosing a team member? So we've talked about the mentorship piece. Now you're building your team. What does that process look like? And Elizabeth, I'm going to kick it back to you to kick us off.
Sure. Looking at the team, I don't really look for someone who has the exactly background. I think because, the world is evolving. You're looking for someone who has done this thing for 10 years. This person may not have the courage, capability to learn new things and to invent, to be creative. So I'm looking for someone who has a track record to reinvent things, to make things better, always build the best practices, and also to have really proven track record to make real difference, whether it's on customer, building new product, or making some social impact, and then also demonstrate the ability to learn new tricks and apply it. I want to stop here because I think they might have a really better way to look at their teams.
Genevieve, do you have anything you'd like to add to how you look for team members?
For me, it's always about a couple of things. I want to be committed to having a wide range of voices in our teams and a wide range of points of view and perspectives. So we're often looking for as much kind of diversity is an overused term, because I think if you don't have inclusion and practices around getting people to belong beyond that, you can create other kinds of challenges for yourself. But for me, it's about a diversity of experiences, a diversity of backgrounds, I'm really a big believer in a commitment to a set of values, maybe not a culture, but a set of values. So for me, I am always looking for people who are team oriented and collaborative. But more than that, I'm also looking for people who are invested in the success of others. I sometimes think it's easy to have people who are team players, but not necessarily invested in the success of others. And I think that for me is a critical piece.
Yeah.
And then I think you also have to be really willing as a leader of teams like that to imagine that once you have a diverse team, you're also going to have more conflict, because you no longer have a shared shorthand, and you actually have to explicate your thinking, and lots of different points of view brings lots of tension. And so for me, you have to think on two pieces, right? What makes a good team member, but then what makes a good team leader? And you have to be growing both of those points of view at once.
Fantastic. Sarah, anything to add before we move on?
What I think is important is curiosity with the team, and also the willingness to help each other. I think it's not mine, but rather if they help you, you'll be helping them later on. So I look for a team with mixed skills as well, depending on
the power of the collective. Absolutely. Yeah. We've got a lot more questions. People are so excited, and thank you everyone for sending your questions. And this is what it's about. It's about engaging and helping you guys figure out your journey. And I love this question. It says, from Casilda, it says, it seems your trajectories have included several reinventions or pivots. How do you go about making a personal reinvention plan? I'm guessing that she is looking to do just that. So Sarah, I'm gonna have you kick us off on how to develop a reinvention plan.
I'm still working on it.
Totally fair.
I don't even know many times if it's a plan, but rather it evolves for me. Things come out, for instance, my own curiosity, and I pick up things. Things are changing in the tech world. So I can't really say that I have a plan for the next 10 years and the next 5 years, but I'm usually thinking about what's of interest to me. I think I also have the advantage of having so many different roles, of being in academics, being in business, being in consulting. So I'm wearing many hats. So I'm juggling it. But for me, I probably, in terms of a plan, if I would have said, 15 years ago, this is what my plan is, I'm never quite following that. I'm just too busy, I think.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Elizabeth or Genevieve, anything else to add?
I think it's good for the plan, but you can't be so narrow because things are changing. Think about it. 6 months ago, were we in the situation where we had our plans, right? And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up another competitor to WeWork, and then.
So in terms of self reinventing, I would think, it depends on, are you going to reinvent yourself to an existing role or some role that's probably never exists, right? Like, for example, if you want to involve yourself by using artificial intelligence, most likely your job probably is not there yet. So then the self reinventing process could be learning the technology, try to say, I apply this technology to different industries, and then discover what are the potential new roles that you may be able to qualify or you are aspire to. If it's existing role, for example, board member, and I wanted to be on the public board. And then what I did is I went to study all the best B school, all the programs. I found out that Harvard offers really great certificate programs. So I took 3 classes, and now I can see I'm very confident and very comfortable in the boardroom because I got the Harvard corporate board certificate.
So for you, education is the key to reinvention.
Yeah, the education, and also to learn, to really talk to the expert, and to really know enough about what you are going to become. Because a lot of times you just rule it out, say, this doesn't work. This is not something that I could do. Or this doesn't pay enough for me to pay my kids to going through the college, right? You have to think all sorts of financial and also your career trajectory. Look at all aspects to decide if this is the right place to do. I would say that study, investigate, and then try it out and find the expert who can lead you and or find some partners who can reinvent together to encourage each other.
Absolutely. I have always found that the plan is not as valuable as the planning process. And to Sarah's point earlier, being goal oriented, like what is the goal of the reinvention, and then kind of reverse engineering would be kind of how I think I would go about that. But again, to Elizabeth's point, asking and talking to other people who have gone and built what you're looking to build or looking to do ahead of time, I think that's a really valuable approach there. Casilda, I hope we answered your question. Go ahead, Genevieve.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, don't think you have to do it on your own. I mean, I think one of the more powerful things you can do as a human being is ask other humans for help. And I know we sometimes get trapped into thinking that asking for help is a sign of weakness, but in fact, being willing to ask for help, both people that you know and people that you don't know, creates a whole lot of other people that become invested in whatever you are trying to do, but also then creates mutual relationships of social indebtedness. You're on the hook to them later, and I actually think that's a good way of keeping connections live and alive. And so I think most reinventions don't necessarily follow the arc you intended, but I suspect being both clear about what your risk tolerance is, so how much are you willing to risk and what do you think you're risking, and really critically interrogating that, because frequently what you are risking is quite different than what you anticipated, and then being clear that you need to sort of inveigle other people to help.
I love that word, inveigle. That's great.
Yeah, shouldn't just be on your own.
It definitely doesn't need to be lone wolf syndrome. And to your point, Genevieve, it's about being vulnerable, right? Being able to ask for help, which I think I know as I advanced in my career, I realized that was actually a huge skill to have, to ask for help and to be vulnerable. And people respond much more effectively when you're willing to open yourself up in that way. So I think that's a fantastic point. And continuing down that same kind of query road, Terry asks, it seems that I have heard women talk about pivots in their careers more than I've heard men talk about it. Is it a different perception, a different experience, or just honesty? Genevieve, I'm going to go to you first on this one. Since you are the cultural anthropologist, I think you're probably the most suited.
Listen, I think it's a couple of different things. I think in some ways it is about the stories we tell, and those are deeply cultural stories. So the kind of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, so a narrative arc that you're all familiar with. If you've ever seen a movie, you have seen Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Someone sets out, bad things happen, eventually good things happen. It's that arc, right? But there are many trials and tribulations. It's a very particular cultural narrative. We are familiar with what that looks like when it's men. Like it's a lot of kind of, trials and tribulations and sort of sudden successes. If you actually look at most of those trials and tribulations in the careers of many people we would think were quite remarkable, you actually see a series of strategic recalibrations and reinventions. I think the way we make women talk about and perform their careers in events like this is that we have to tell this story of, and then I went and did this completely different thing, and then I went and did something else, and we celebrate those. But I think in some ways the structural forces are very different. Most women have encountered different kinds of systemic bias. There are different structural forces at work in women's lives, but this doesn't look the same globally, and the stories get told really differently. So is it, I think your question was, is it just that women are more honest about it? No, but I think they get asked about it really differently. So I think there's a whole piece about, when was the last time a man got asked in a forum, how are you balancing your work-life constraints? Give me some guidance about how to have children and a career.
How can you have it all?
Exactly. A question you might reasonably want to ask other people, but we don't. So I think there's something also about the kind of questions that get asked that solicit a particular set of answers.
So it's gender bias is what you're kind of alluding to.
I'm not saying it's gender bias. No? I'm saying it's about gender, which isn't always the same thing.
It's gendered. Got it. Okay. I think that is a very important differentiation. Elizabeth, any perspective on whether this is a man versus women, a global conversation? What has been your experience with being vulnerable and pivoting, and the men in your life or in your careers having that same conversation?
I think that the women sometimes are more truthful about their setbacks or their struggles. And also women usually are more collaborative or or they're open, and then they ask for other advices. That's why you probably hear a lot more discussion around reinvention. And because a lot of times women just found out, you know what, this job is no longer a good fit for me. I need to do something very differently. I mean, I've been pigeonholed into a position. And then this is why women would put a lot more effort versus men already have the trailblazer, and they went through all the paths, and they already have that role model in front of them. But women, they're like trying to find, who are my role models? How can I do this? And not many women who are the CEO of the Fortune 500 companies. And what I'm going to do? Should I take an MBA? Should I not having kids? Should I do? There's so many questions of how can I become a Fortune 500 company CEO? But men, they were like, okay.
They don't question it as much.
No,
they just
know it's
take the
possible.
Directive. Yeah, I see that. So we have a ton of questions. Thank you guys for being so interactive and engaged. This is one that we always like to ask, which is, looking back in time, what is one piece of advice that you would give someone early in their career that you wish that you had known earlier in yours? And I'm gonna have Sarah kick us off on this one. This is the talking to yourself back in time question.
I think two things. I would tell myself that sometimes I would tell myself, go for it, that I don't need to have that 100%, that when challenges are given to me, I would take it more. And the second thing I would think is that I need to always ask myself, do I really love this? And once I'm really passionate about something, it's not work anymore. It used to be, some of my friends used to joke with me. It was like, Sarah isn't going to work. It's one of the things I tell you is I love technology so much. Some of my friends are going, for a vacation, they go to, let's say go skiing, or they'll go to the beach. My best vacations are going to the Consumer Electronics Show. Can you imagine? My husband and I go. It was the best. And this, we were just so happy that last year we probably even got the COVID-19 there, but we were just so happy there. So I think that you realize what you really love. And I think so many times we're so interested in what is our plan and where's the next one. And I'm hearing from women, they're saying, oh, I need to get into data analysis. I said, I need to get into AI, machine learning, and they know buzzwords. But I said, but what would you really love to do? Would you really want to be in front of the computer all day? Do you want to do the data analytics all day? And once you find that out, then I think I would be telling myself, get in touch with that. And that's not always so easy. You almost have to try it out. Everybody says, find your passion, do what you love. And everybody thinks that's simple. And that isn't so simple until you start trying it. And I think that would be my advice.
So yours was go for it and follow what you love, which I think is really valuable.
And check on it each time,
Yeah, check in with yourself, make sure that it's still making you happy and that you're still excited about it. And never go on vacation with Sarah. Just kidding.
Hey, Sarah, I'll go with you. Go to the CS.
You're in the right audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Elizabeth, what would be your advice back in time to your younger self?
Let's just say I have so many of them. And I'd just say the number one is, we all take vacation, right? And I felt like if I talk to a younger version of me, to say, if you spend 1 week of time, do nothing, but just go deeper in technology. Not only just go learn things, but also to summarize, to make video, to write paper, to do things. Because the number one barrier for the women leaders, people think you're not technical enough. Because I just feel like over the years, I did not spend enough time to file patents, to write articles, to do all sorts of things, because I was so busy building all sorts of a product. And I think that the brand, if you talk about, Laura talk about brand, elevated by brand, right? The brand is not only just you're a great leader, but also you're a great technologist.
Yeah.
Like, how can you have this solid branding in technology by having maybe YouTube, having the white paper, having more, patents to prove you're solid technologist. I think that's one thing.
Having a super technical background and drilling down into it.
Yeah. So last year I got the Amazon Cloud certificate.
Got it. So again, you're all about education, Elizabeth.
I think that education is very important because that gave me more confidence.
I totally understand. I did a JD MBA because I felt like if I didn't have those degrees, then I couldn't stand in a room full of men and own that room. Now I know I can. I also now know it wasn't because of the education. So I think that goes to, I think it was Sarah's point earlier, that we need to have like 100% to apply. And now we know that we don't. Genevieve, what is your advice to your younger self?
Well, so I got a lot of advice when I was younger, and there's two pieces of it that continue to be useful. I think I put it the other way, right? So one of them was, my mother was very clear when we were young that you had a moral obligation to make the world a better place, that it shouldn't be about what was good for you, it should be about what was good for others. And my mother was pretty clear that if you were going to expend the amount of work one expended in the arc of a career, it should be in the service of making the world a better place. So
is that the David Hume theory?
Well, so for me, it's a useful check of, is this the right career? Is this the right way to be spending my time? Are things better at the end of this particular expenditure of energy or not? Which is sometimes a heavy bar, but it helps me think through lots of issues. Sort of, I was listening to some of the conversation we just had and wanting to remind myself that, women as a category isn't singular. There are lots of different ways of being a woman. There are lots of different lived experiences of women.
That's right.
And lots of different ways of thinking about what barriers are and what desires are, and the same with men. And so for me, it's always a bit tricky to work out how not to have a conversation that says all women. And then I think that, or all men for the very same matter. I think, by the same token, the other piece of advice I got, and I was a little older when I had it, and I wished I'd had it earlier, was about making sure you set time to catch up with yourself. Not in the kind of mindfulness, wellness sense, but in the
self-care.
No, actually,
not like that. What you're saying?
Not that. In the kind of actually being conscious about knowing what you've accomplished and what you were worth, and what you should then be able to ask for. So the kind of being able to embody your own lived experiences and your own life journey, and in Elizabeth's case, her certificates, and being able to sort of internalize and know what those are worth to you, so that you know how to turn up in a conversation, not kind of doing the constant apologetic thing of, well, I only know this piece, but of actually owning what you do know, and of thus being able to sort of turn up authentically with your basically your biography. And I think making whatever you need to sort of take that on. I mean, I do think there's a whole culture of enforced modesty, and I think that's a challenge, right? That is gendered. There's an enforced modesty.
Totally.
And working out how to own your accomplishments and own your biography in a way that both feels comfortable, but also acknowledges what you've accomplished. That was a piece of advice I was given later in my life that I wish I had earlier. And that whenever I'm asked, is one piece of advice I always give to people, is find whatever ritual works for you to incorporate all of that, so that when you're turning up with everything you are, and you've internalized that.
I mean, can we just drop a mic on that one? That was such a heart-centered and head-focused, like that was the perfect combination. I call that being center brain, both the left and the right, just talking in perfect harmony. Thank you for that. Elizabeth, you wanted to add something?
I'd like to add one thing, that when I was little, I liked to play in the mud. And my mom will always say, God, your dress is so dirty. So I remember I was 5, my father put me and put on my lap, on his lap, said, you know what? You can play mud and do whatever the boys do. And at the same time, you can still wear pretty dresses. I think that really gave me the confidence that I can be pretty, and also being, doing all sorts of things that guy did. Because when I studied space physics, I was the only 2 girls in the whole class. So because of that, I'm so confident in dealing with guys and boys and then not get intimidated by them.
I have a feeling that nobody on this panel is very easily intimidated. I'm just going to call that one out. We have another question that is actually very practical. What is a book, fiction or nonfiction, that you think women in technology would benefit from reading? I love this. It's very like tactical. I'm going to go to Sarah. Well, actually, whoever has, I don't want to like call you out if you don't have a book in mind. I know it might take a moment to think of that. And if you don't have it in mind, we can certainly type it in the chat at a later date. So does anyone have a specific book in mind? Genevieve is going to grab hers right now to share with us. It's called Radio Girl. You're on mute, darling.
I know, and I just turned off my video. It's called Radio Girl. It's by David Duffy, and it is a history of the first female electrical engineer in Australia.
Oh, yes. I love that one.
She was completely fabulous because not only was she an electrical engineer, she taught Australian soldiers during World War II Morse code. So she ran a teaching school. She taught in the university sector. She ran her own company selling radios between World War I and World War II. And then in the 1950s and 1960s, she became a passionate advocate for electrifying Australian homes. And she produced a cookbook, but the cookbook was just a cover for an electrical how-to manual at the back. So it's 50 pages of recipes and then 50 pages of how to repair every electrical appliance in your home. She was completely fabulous.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so David Duffy, Radio Girl.
There we go. Elizabeth or Sarah, any books that you would recommend?
Yeah, I would. I'm reading a book called Three Bodies. It's a science fiction book about how the aliens invade Earth and how the Earth is combating the aliens, and all sorts of like 2D, 3D, and it's all sorts of crazy stuff that I think is quite creative. And the author was a Chinese, and it was translated into many, many languages. It's called The Three Bodies. It's very interesting scientific book and science fiction book.
The Witty team is typing these books in the chat so you guys can copy, paste, and buy on Amazon or wherever else. Sarah, any books in your bookshelf?
I would even say Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. That it
more really, about leadership.
Yes, that you really can think about it. And I think the one thing I would stress to people is, besides education that I think is so important, is what people are missing many times is to see the whole picture. That when I speak with many times, even some women on tech, they're so focused on their specific tasks. When I ask them, well, what's the purpose of this? Well, it's just not the coding. Or I'll ask someone else, who's your competitor? And I'm always shocked. It doesn't matter if male, female, they really don't know their competitors well. So getting more of a broad picture of what is the purpose of what we're doing, it's lost many times because we're just thinking about that new product or that new tech of all the specs, but we don't think about the broader work there. So I think it's important.
I think that's great. It's not just technical, it's about leadership. Elizabeth, did you have something else you want to add?
I wrote a book called The Myth of Promotion, 10 Steps to a Successful Career. You can check it out at Amazon. It basically 10 fundamental steps that worked for me. And then, if you like.
Practical application. We love it. Yes, and also Liz has called out in the chat that Witty has a list of books. They have a bookstore that you can go in and purchase a lot of these books there. So make sure you click on the Witty bookstore because they've got some great tools for everyone as well. Okay, we're going to go back to general advice. Kate asks, what advice would you give on how to present a way you can help an organization or help it grow without sounding like you think they're doing it wrong? I love this. I'm going to go to Genevieve on this one because I think this is a more cultural thing as well.
It is. Listen, I always think there's a couple of things you should do when you're in that position. Number one is you should be really clear about what the organization thinks its strategy is. So go do your homework. Step number one, work out where they think they're going, what they think their pain points are, what their aspirations are. And if they don't have those, that's always an excellent place you can intervene and help, because having a strategy and a direction is the thing most healthy organizations should have. But step number one for me, do your homework, work out where they're coming from, work out what your organization or the organization believes its goal is, what its strategic vision is. I sometimes think it's incredibly helpful to know what's going on in the broader sector. One of the fastest ways to frequently move an organization is to make it clear to them that they are either out of step or lagging behind the people they regard as their competition.
Especially in technology, right?
Exactly. Likewise, being clear that there are adjacencies and opportunities that you might be missing. So I sometimes think, certainly in tech companies I've known well, that we don't always remember who our actual competition is. So we think our competition is the direct competition, as opposed to the competition is sometimes coming from a completely different place. 20 years ago, most computer companies didn't realize that mobile phones were going to be a category that they needed to pay attention to. They just thought they were phones, as opposed to baby computers. And so being clear about where the real challenges are. And then I think framing it as a set of possibilities, not a set of prescriptions, is really helpful.
About tone.
It was also about, I imagine in most circumstances, most of us actually believe what we want is a conversation. So what you're suggesting is, here are some ways of, thinking about the place that you're in. So for me, do your homework, understand the competitive landscape, and then frame it as a set of possibilities, not a set of prescriptions. Yeah,
I think it's a more positive perspective, as opposed to saying, you're doing a shitty job of this, we need to fix it. It's, here's what the opportunities and possibilities are, to your point.
Frequently, when you lay out a competitive landscape, it makes it clear that you're not doing a very good job.
I think that's very true as well. It's like, let the numbers and the data speak for itself, right?
Yeah, and sometimes
Elizabeth, you want to add?
I think sometimes the organization will have very, very open, discuss the challenges. When you talk about those challenges, and then you could just say, as you said, that what are the possible ways to take on those challenges. Another thing is when you talk about what the company has missed, maybe companies strategically decided not to invest in those areas. And also when you talk about the possibility, maybe present the investment requirement, just say, this is not just happening like magic. You need to really put resources and the money and the people on those things to make it possible. And, as honest as you can.
So I'm just going to go back to another retrospective question, because these are always the ones that I think are so interesting, because it's like looking back in time. In retrospect, what was your biggest mistake? And I'm going to add an additional piece to it. What was the lesson from it? Because in my opinion, there's no such thing as a mistake as long as you learn from it, right? It's about what the lessons are moving forward. And Genevieve's giving me side eye. I don't think you believe what I just said at all. And you can totally call me out, and that's fine. This is a dialogue.
Listen, I think it's part of it. We have a particular propensity to want to have people reflect their worst moments. It's sort of it's a vague prurient interest, right? It's sort of like, well, if that happened to them, then maybe I can get through my own moment, which I totally understand. I mean, listen, I remember the moment I thought I'd made the biggest mistake in my life. I can even tell you the day, and I can probably tell you the time of day. So it was a Tuesday. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was in 1998, and it was in September, the Tuesday after whatever the long weekend is we have in September in the United States. And it was my first day of a new job. I had just sat through a whole series of conversations, and I went back to my cube, and I put my head on my desk, and I thought, I just made the biggest mistake in my entire life.
By taking the job?
By taking the job. I was like, okay, I have left Stanford, where I was on the faculty. I've left an academic career I understood and a career in anthropology. I have taken a job at Intel. I've moved to Oregon from California. It's going to rain soon. And my boss has just explained to me what she thinks my job is. And if that's my job, I think I just need to put my head down on my cube desk and cry. And pretty much, that was, I was convinced that was the worst mistake I'd ever made. And that feeling went on for quite some time. In retrospect.
And the lesson from it was?
It's okay to put your head down and have a good cry occasionally. Like, I think sometimes it's actually okay to be in the moment of going, but that was a terrible idea. No, I think the lesson was you have to remember why you make decisions. And I think actually the piece about being okay with, at the time you made that decision, that was the right calculation. All the pieces of data you had at hand suggested that was a good decision. And truthfully, I would never go back and change that day. And I'd never go back and change the 22 years I've spent inside Intel. I wouldn't change that for the world. But it being okay that it was a terrible idea and a terrible mistake in that moment doesn't change the 20 years that followed it, and doesn't change the moment that in that moment I thought it was a terrible idea. And I think being okay with all of those things, right? Of that you make decisions with the best data you have at hand, and you can then find new data and go, oh, damn, that was not a good idea, without having to then think that the person that made the decisions, i.e. you, was a complete idiot, because I wasn't. It's like, I just didn't know everything. And then, what I think I learned from that was that, again, that it's still okay to make really big changes. And that it will, of course, the first couple of years, in this particular instance, will be just very odd and deeply uncomfortable. And that's okay too.
It is okay. Sarah, what was your biggest mistake and what was the lesson you learned from it?
I don't know about the biggest. I have so many mistakes all the time, but I just even think in terms of work-wise, I developed a model to detect fraud, a simulation model to detect fraud in companies, publicly traded companies. And my research was that I found that all publicly traded companies, I'm going to say something, and I guess I'm recorded live, cheat somewhat. They kind of make their books more rosy. But what I was able to do is simulate that those companies that really went overboard, they were very different from their peers. For instance, if you're going to make phony sales, your expenses should be going up, but their expenses didn't. So they look very different from their peers. And I had a brilliant idea. This is simulation. I went to all my C-suite former executive MBAs, and I said, why don't you try out my simulation model? It's just a simulator. And I was just shocked. Nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I said, it's not talking about in your company. It's just going to be simulating. Then I went to auditors, the top auditors. This is a great simulation. And they say, we love you dearly, Sarah. You're the greatest, but we don't want to touch it. Then I went to the IRS, the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they met me Friday afternoon. They denied it after 5 o'clock. I came in like I was a spy or something like that. I walk up to the 4th floor with my colleague, and then we're there. And he says, if we try your model, then what am I going to do with my 200 attorneys and all my accountants here? What am I going to tell Dingle in Congress? And he goes, I'll look at your model, but only in a brown paper bag, without my name. And I said, what mistake did I do? I said, no, thank you. And it was just interesting how sometimes I get so consumed with my theories here that when I go and I apply it, I don't realize what the state is. And then what I found out, people that were interested in my models were those companies that were suing, when they went through and suing all these Fortune 500 companies. Oh, that's a great model. We can use it. So
I think that you need to talk.
What I learned here is my hubris. I'm just so happy with my own ideas that I sometimes fail to see that there's a social component in there and people don't want to face it.
That's exactly right. I was going to say, you need to take your ideas and talk to Genevieve and make sure that the human element plays as well.
Yeah, probably the board's audit committee would be interested in using your model.
Right. Well, theoretically, because they're going to be liable too. But I found out that that naivety of myself, But anyways, but I'll find a way.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what was your biggest mistake and your biggest lesson from it?
Well, there's so many of them. I think, I was joking to my friend another day, bought the Tesla in 2013 without buying the stock. That was one of the mistakes. Like, you love the product, you should consider buying the stock as well. But that was just one thing. That's just a joke. And then the biggest mistake I made was I one time was offered a job of a CEO of a public company. I turned it down without even thinking, without even saying, yeah, I'll think about it. And then I think anytime people really offer you some opportunity, unless you just really do not want to do it, at least you should say, I'll think about it and come back the next day. I think that was the biggest mistake. I still remember, as you said, I still remember the location, the time, who told me that, and because that was one of the lifetime, opportunity I turned it down.
I think that these are all very fair, very vulnerable answers, and I think the bigger takeaway here is that failure is part of the job, right? It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's about the lessons you learn from it. And that even women of your caliber and stature fail and fall down every single day. And that's totally 100% okay and acceptable. And it is for every single one of you listening in as well. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that I also raise a point that Winfred mentioned in the QA. Did you guys know that today is International Women in Engineering Day? I did not know this. Did you guys know this?
No.
Well, it was yesterday for us, so yes.
Yesterday for you, yes.
Yes.
Yep. We celebrated it here.
So I wanted to say thank you, Winfred, for letting us know that, because, I mean, you could not find a better panel to celebrate, or a better conference to celebrate that, those achievements. So thank you for that. As we're wrapping things up, I want to make sure that we're leaving on a really positive note. So first of all, I want you to let everyone know how they can get in touch with you or your company if they need any extra advice. And then if you could just leave us with your final words of wisdom, things that you want people to take away from this conversation and the conference. So I am going to start with Elizabeth.
Well, I first like to thank Witty. I learned tremendously since the beginning of my career in 1995. And then, I'm a big fan of Witty. I'm so honored to be the Hall of Fame. And then one thing I will suggest all of women, just believe in yourself and try to find the partner, and then try to encourage each other and help the community. And if you want to get in touch with me, just go to LinkedIn, send me an invite. And I give a lot of a seminar. I have another seminar this Saturday. And then, just feel free to join me, and love to be connected with you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And I think that goes across the board. Everyone is available via LinkedIn if you should need them. But thank you for those positive words of reinforcement. Genevieve, I'm gonna kick it over to you for your final words of wisdom.
Oh, well, listen, I'm back to two things I started with, right? The piece of advice for myself from my mother, which I think should be everyone's, which is that I think we all have a moral obligation to make the world a better place. And I'm acutely aware at the moment that we have an enormous amount of work to do. I think both where I sit and where you sit, there is significant, meaningful work to be done about what it means to make the world a better place. And for me, that actually means every piece of our daily labor and our daily work and our intellect. And then the second piece was, I said that I think there is power in asking for help. And as usual, I need help. So at the beginning, you asked me what I was doing. I said, well, I was establishing a new branch of engineering to take AI safely, responsibly, and sustainably to scale. It's kind of an act of extraordinary hubris to declare you're going to build a new branch of engineering. And as a result, I need help. We've managed to successfully recruit 2 cohorts of students. I'm about to go live with the recruit for my 3rd cohort of students, because I figured the easiest way to build a branch of engineering was to teach it into existence. So if you go to our website, which is the 3ainstitute.org, you will find a newsletter you can sign up for, and you will find momentarily a call for our next cohort of master's students. We have some scholarships we give. Up until now, our cohorts have been 50% female and diverse, both in terms of ethnic backgrounds and lived experiences, and I want to continue that. So if you have someone in your life, or in your life yourself, because my students also range in age from 25 to 60, if you suddenly think, I'd like to go to Australia and think about building a new branch of engineering, please come along. And if you don't think that, but you know someone who should, or you can think of a place who should be partnering with us, sponsoring us, or engaging with us, I need all the help I can get, because this is still a crazy thing to be declaring that I need to do. So help, help, help.
And again, being vulnerable and asking for help. So thank you for walking your own talk.
I so absolutely mean it.
I know you do. And finally, Dr. Sarah Rishnik, can you please take us home with your beautiful words of wisdom as we wrap things up?
One is, in as I'm getting older, what I see is kindness. That we get so caught up that when I reach out and I'm kind, I always think I am, but I don't display it all the time. And I think that kindness is what we need more of. Plus, you can reach out to me in LinkedIn. I'm starting to do a Tech Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. So you can reach out for me there. And I think we need to support one another. And I think women have a great, not only responsibility, but have great assets that they can share. And I think we can be proud of it. And it's nothing wrong to support each other, but it's an asset.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one more thing that I'm going to start a campaign, like using GoFundMe. And our goal is to have 50,000 laptops for the low-income girls. And then, we're going to launch that campaign with the Tanoshi, a startup company that co-founded by a lady. And I'm on their board as well. And I hope that whoever wants to join this campaign, let's make a real difference.
And I think that those are great words to end on. The Witty team has added all of the comments, all of the books, all of the opportunities to connect with these fantastic ladies in the chat, and I'm sure they will do so via social post-conference. If you guys could all just join me in giving a from home clap, snaps, waves, whatever the Zoom etiquette is. Ladies, thank you so much for being on this panel. You really do lead with kindness, innovation, integrity, and I personally thank you for the work that you do. So thank you for being on the panel and allowing me to join you in this conversation.
Laura,
and the rest of you
did an excellent job.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, guys.
Laura, you're awesome.